These are women who came to the Hill and testified that they were groomed and raped at the age of 14 and 16 years old, and they called to meet with the president and to meet with the FBI and to have people investigate their claims. Some of them have never testified before. If you are so interested in getting the public to submit any information, why have you not met with them? You said you haven't met with them. Have you met with them? I'll give you one more chance.
My job as the FBI director is to invite
Is
all
the answer yes or
investigative
no
leads.
to whether or not you met with these women who were sexually abused and raped?
Any insinuation by you or any
What
people
is
on
the
your side that I am not manhunting child predators and sex traffickers, just look at the
Mr.
stats.
Patel,
And you talk
Mr.
about
Chairman,
cover-ups, man.
Mr. Chairman,
you
this
talk
is
about
my time,
cover-ups.
and I will take as much time as I
Where
want.
were you during the
Instruct
Obama
the
and
witness,
Biden
Mr.
administrations
Chairman.
when these so-called
Instruct the
cover-ups were
witness.
going on?
Mr.
Why didn't
Chairman.
anyone in those administrations talk to any of these
Mr.
purported
Chairman.
witnesses?
Yeah,
I have
get some regular order, Mr.
every
Chairman.
single person to provide credible information.
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Washington.
And I'm
but
going to take
when
another
you
couple
accuse
of
the
minutes.
witness of something, he's allowed to respond. That's how it works. You say
Listen,
something,
he didn't
you say
even,
something,
excuse me,
he's allowed
Mr.
to
Chairman,
respond.
you have
Point
always
of
been
order.
fair, but this
And
is
I'm
not
being
fair.
47 seconds ago, in a packed House Judiciary Committee hearing room, something happened that will fundamentally alter how America views the Jeffrey Epstein investigation forever. FBI Director Kash Patel, the man who once promised no stone left unturned, sat frozen as Representative Pramila Jayapal from Washington's 7th District asked him a question so direct, so devastating, that his composure cracked in real time on live television. "Are the victims credible or not?" she demanded. "It's a yes or no answer." And Patel, the man who built his reputation on taking down traffickers, who promised total transparency about the Epstein files, couldn't say yes. He wouldn't say yes. For 23 agonizing seconds captured by every camera in that room, he deflected, pivoted, and refused to validate the credibility of women who were trafficked as children. This isn't just another congressional hearing. This is the moment the Epstein cover-up was exposed on live television, and the FBI director's own words became the evidence against him. The hearing was supposed to be routine FBI oversight, budget discussions, operational updates, maybe some partisan theater. Nobody expected what Jayapal walked into that room carrying: a manila folder thick with documents and a line of questioning so precise it felt like a surgical strike. The press gallery was packed, cameras positioned at every angle, but the atmosphere felt different from the moment she sat down. Patel arrived confident. He's handled tough hearings before, weathered political storms, survived attacks from both sides. His standard playbook: deflect with bureaucracy, cite ongoing investigations, run out the clock with non-answers that sound official but say nothing. But today, something would break that playbook completely. But from the moment Jayapal opened her folder, something was different. She wasn't fishing for information. She already had it. This was a former federal prosecutor who'd spent weeks building an airtight case, and she was about to spring it with methodical precision that would leave no escape route. "Mr. Patel," she began, her voice calm but loaded with something dangerous, "before you joined the FBI, you had very strong opinions about what the FBI was hiding regarding Jeffrey Epstein." That opening line was surgical, not an accusation, not an attack. Just a statement of fact that immediately put Patel in an impossible position. Because what she was about to do wasn't question him about the investigation. She was about to use his own words to prove he'd betrayed everything he once stood for. She pulled out his September 2023 interview with Glenn Beck. "The Black Book is under the direct control of the director of the FBI," she read. His own voice, his own promise of transparency. December 2023. "Let us know who the pedophiles are." Again, his words. February 2025, just after becoming FBI director. "There will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned." His tweet displayed for millions to see. June, on Joe Rogan. "We've reviewed all the information. We're going to give you every single thing we have and can." Each quote hit like a hammer blow because everyone in that room knew what was coming next. The betrayal. The moment when all those promises turned to dust. But then suddenly, in July, everything changed, Jayapal continued, and her voice carried the weight of documented deception. You and Attorney General Pam Bondi released one video and said that there was nothing more to see. The temperature in the room dropped. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't partisan politics. This was a documented timeline of broken promises backed by public statements that couldn't be denied. Patel shifted in his chair. You could see his mind working, calculating, trying to find the bureaucratic escape hatch. But there wasn't one. Not when confronted with his own words, his own promises, his own timeline of deception. Your July memo says you uncovered more than 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence, but that you had decided no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. 300 gigabytes. Let that sink in. That's not a small investigation. That's not nothing to see here. That's massive amounts of evidence that suddenly became classified the moment it reached Patel's desk. For context, that's equivalent to 150,000 pages of documents, thousands of photos, hundreds of hours of recorded testimony, all buried with a single memo. Then came the accusation that changed everything. I think what happened, Mr. Patel, is that suddenly you discovered that Donald Trump's name was all over these files and you started a giant cover-up. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Not implied, not suggested. Stated directly, on the record, under oath. The FBI director had covered up evidence because it implicated the former president. Patel's face went through visible changes. First, shock that she'd said it so directly. Then, rapid calculation about how to respond without confirming it. Finally, something that looked like trapped panic. His left hand moved to adjust his tie, a self-soothing gesture that betrayed his psychological stress. The confident FBI director who'd entered that room was crumbling in real time. But Jayapal wasn't done dismantling him. She had documents. She had sources. She had the Wall Street Journal reporting that in May, Attorney General Bondi told Trump he was in the Epstein files and that the DOJ wouldn't release them. This wasn't speculation. This was documented coordination between the highest levels of government to bury evidence. You could see Patel's lawyers behind him shift uncomfortably. They knew what was coming. This wasn't standard congressional theater where friendly witnesses get softball questions from allied committee members. This was a prosecutor methodically building a case, and Patel was walking directly into every trap. To your knowledge, did Attorney General Pam Bondi speak to the president about what was in the Epstein files? I can't speak for Attorney General Pam Bondi. The deflection was immediate and telling. Not no, not I don't know. Just a refusal to answer that screamed guilt to anyone watching. Then came the moment that will define this hearing forever. Jayapal brought up the survivors, the women who came forward, who testified about being trafficked at 14 and 16 years old, who had been asking to meet with the FBI and the president. These weren't anonymous accusers or distant witnesses. These were real women with names, faces, and documented testimony who had risked everything to tell their stories. If you are so interested in getting the public to submit any information, why have you not met with them? Simple question. Devastating implications. The FBI director who claims to welcome new information won't meet with the survivors. The man whose job it is to protect trafficking victims was actively avoiding them. Patel's hesitation was visible. You could see him searching for an answer that wouldn't incriminate him further. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. And then he made the critical mistake that would destroy him completely. Patel's response was explosive. Instead of answering, he attacked. Any insinuation by you or any people on your side that I am not manhunting child predators and sex traffickers? Where were you during the Obama and Biden administrations when these so-called cover-ups were going on? So-called cover-ups. That phrase revealed everything. Patel was dismissing the experiences of trafficking survivors as political theater. Republican committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even his allies knew he'd just made a catastrophic error that would haunt him forever. The room erupted. But through the chaos, Jayapal stayed focused, stayed surgical. She cut through his deflections with laser precision. Are the victims of the Jeffrey Epstein horrific trafficking ring, are they credible? It should have been the easiest question in the world for an FBI director to answer. These were women who testified about being trafficked as children. Of course they're credible. Any reasonable person, any law enforcement official, any human being with a conscience would immediately say yes. But Patel couldn't say it. He wouldn't say it, because saying yes would validate their testimony, and their testimony implicated people too powerful to investigate. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the air conditioning humming, cameras clicking, reporters typing furiously. Any person with information about ongoing sexual trafficking? He started his bureaucratic dodge, but Jayapal cut through it. I'm asking you if they're credible. Ma'am, I'm commenting on the evidence we have. Still no yes? Still no validation? Just more deflection from the man whose job is to protect trafficking victims. The back and forth continued, Patel growing more defensive, more desperate, more obviously trapped by his own contradictions. The man who promised transparency was refusing to validate trafficking survivors. The man who swore to leave no stone unturned was sitting on 300 gigabytes of evidence. Are these women credible? It's a yes or no answer. 23 seconds of silence. In congressional hearings, 23 seconds is an eternity. It's a confession without words. It's the moment when everyone watching realizes that the FBI director can't validate trafficking survivors because their testimony threatens his political masters. When he finally responded, it wasn't with yes. It was with more deflection about new, credible information and attacks on previous administrations. The contrast was devastating. Trafficking survivors asking for justice, and an FBI director who promised transparency but delivered cover-up. Women who risked everything to tell their stories, and a federal law enforcement chief who wouldn't even acknowledge their credibility. As the hearing devolved into procedural chaos, with members shouting over each other and the chairman trying to restore order, one thing became crystal clear. Kash Patel, the man who built his career fighting corruption, had become the face of the biggest cover-up in FBI history. His transformation from transparency champion to evidence suppressor was complete and undeniable. The implications extend far beyond one congressional hearing. If the FBI director won't validate trafficking survivors, if 300 gigabytes of evidence can be buried with a simple memo, if promises of transparency can be abandoned the moment they threaten powerful people, then what does that say about justice in America? The clips went viral within minutes. FBI director won't call Epstein survivors credible, trending worldwide. Conservative outlets scrambling to defend the indefensible. Liberal outlets calling for immediate resignation. Legal experts were debating whether Patel had just committed perjury on live television. Former FBI officials called his performance disgraceful and unprecedented. And somewhere, trafficking survivors watched the man responsible for federal law enforcement refuse to validate their experiences because the truth was too politically dangerous. This wasn't partisan theater. This wasn't gotcha journalism. This was documented evidence of a systematic cover-up exposed in real time by a director's inability to answer the simplest question in law enforcement. Are trafficking victims credible? 47 seconds. That's all it took for Pramila Jayapal to prove that the FBI's promise of transparency was a lie, that 300 gigabytes of evidence was being buried to protect powerful people, and that trafficking survivors were being silenced by the very agency sworn to protect them. Kash Patel walked out of that hearing knowing his credibility was destroyed, not by partisan attacks, but by his own refusal to validate trafficking victims, not by political theater, but by documented evidence of broken promises. The Epstein files remain hidden, the 300 gigabytes of evidence remain classified, and the FBI director who promised no cover-ups just proved on live television that the cover-up is real, ongoing, and extends to the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Sometimes accountability doesn't require complex investigations or months of testimony. Sometimes it just requires asking one simple question that exposes everything. Are the victims credible? Patel's silence was his answer, and that answer revealed more about the state of justice in America than any investigation ever could.